everybody. This is Lisa Riley, and I am the founder of ODOS Synergy Services, Women of Color Entrepreneur Network, Global Entrepreneur Network. And I'm so excited today. I have a phenomenal educator here in our community in Silicon Valley, San Jose, California, and a new author, Miss Gerri Forte. Gerri, thank you for being here with us today. How are you in the midst of the pandemic? Are you safe?
Lisa, I am a baked sweet potato. I'm safe. I'm staying home. I'm bored. My son comes in once a week to check on me. My brother calls, and I have my two chihuahuas here. But I'm very busy. I'm Zooming all the time. So I guess I shouldn't say I'm bored. I just can't get out and get in the stores and shop like I want to.
That's okay, but you're saving a lot of money, right?
No, because you can buy whatever you want through Amazon, and they'll deliver it to your front door.
I heard you talk about that Amazon. You better watch that Amazon, Gerri.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I know.
Gerri, we are here because you are inspired by mental health and advocating for people in the community who have had trauma and abuse around mental health. And you created a book called Of Prayers and Beatings. What inspired you, and who's the group that you're trying to reach out to?
Everybody. I started writing stories, 20, 25 years ago, little short stories about children who were being abused by their parents. There was a time period in my family's life when our house burned to the ground, and we had to move into a section of Vallejo known as Floyd Terrace, which is equivalent to the Hunters Point projects. And I saw a lot of things that were very uncomfortable. I experienced some things that were uncomfortable at home with my dad. My dad was in the Air Force, and I realized after many years that he was suffering from a mental illness. But when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all you know is that this man is the meanest thing walking on two legs. So I started writing stories about instances that I had noticed growing up within my own family, within neighbors, within the families that lived in the projects. And as I grew older and I became an educator, I saw things happening in families. I could see the behavior of students and try to attribute, what is causing this student to act out in this way. And when a child is being abused at home, they have to act it out someplace. So they act it out in the classroom, they act it out on the playground, they act it out going from home because they can't respond at home. So after I started writing all these stories, and I thought, well, I'm going to publish them all as a book of short stories. And then I thought, why would a parent feel that the only way to bring about an effective change in a child is to beat them half to death?
Right.
And I thought, I need to ask my own father that. He used to beat the heck out of us. So I started researching my father. I talked in depth with my mother. She told us things as an adult that she did not want us to know when we were kids. Talked to my grandparents. I went to Chicago and I sat down and had long conversations with my father's youngest two siblings. And information came out about the family. And I tied that in with some historical research and environmental research. And I wrote the book of Prayers and Beatings.
We are in the midst, and you didn't plan it this way, but we're in the midst of the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
And there is, and we were talking about this earlier, there's so much pain, so much emotional trauma in our community as well as other cultures in the midst of this pandemic. And so even though you didn't plan your book it came out before the pandemic, it is really appropriate in the midst of the challenges that we're going through.
Oh, yes.
And anxiety. And so in our community locally, I mean, what do you see the areas that we need to address to do more education and awareness around abuse and mental health, just in our local
The
communities here.
emotional trauma that something like a pandemic will cause. There are times during an individual's life when they're traumatized anyway. Great changes take place. A child graduates from high school and leaves off to go to college, or leaves home to go into incarceration. A divorce, an illness, the loss of a job,
Great,
moving to a new place.
everything.
All these things are traumatic in themselves. So take all of those traumatic incidences and put them into a box and paint the pandemic around it, and there is less chance for release. You have parents who look forward every year for school to start. They go out and buy those school clothes or school supplies. Bye, baby. Kids are off to school, and they're relieved because that means that they don't have to worry about them for the 6 or 8 hours that they're in school. Well, now they're at home, and there's pressure in the home. I've had parents tell me, I take my hat off to you guys. I have an idea of what you were going through. I have 4. You had 35 in the classroom.
Right,
How did you do it? I said, with training and with love and patience. But those types of things are happening. People are losing their jobs. They're losing their means of support. Um, Things that they used to be able to go out and purchase. They can't go out and get McDonald's on a whim for the whole family anymore. People have lost their jobs,
okay. Homelessness too, Jerry. That's a whole
homelessness,
level.
and even though there are programs to um, kind of relieve you of rent and mortgage, it does not take the responsibility away. So you can't pay your rent for 3 months. You're going to eventually have to pay it. The same with that mortgage. These bills do not go away. Utility costs. Um, People who lose their jobs lose their medical insurance. So add all the trauma of living, and then you compound it. You compress it more with the trauma of this pandemic, the uncertainty, not knowing exactly what is it, what's causing it. How am I supposed to react? What happens if I don't wear a mask? How come they're not wearing a mask? People are behaving in ways that they normally would not have. You've probably seen things on Facebook or on the news of people who get into fights in stores because so and so is
Right,
touching the fruit
right,
without wearing a mask.
right.
Or this person's shopping, or this person cut in front of me. And things that normally would not cause that much friction are causing friction. It's causing, the trauma is just building. And we have to get a hold of it and find ways to work through it, understand what it is, and work through it. That's the way we're going to be able to survive.
Of course, we weren't prepared for this pandemic. Who is? Who's ever prepared for something like this, right? But it's like if you had a crystal ball, you probably have a crystal ball in front of you somewhere, and you
This
could
one,
you could create the ideal system or infrastructure. What would that look like? And we talked earlier about, the churches, our community agencies, and then the lack of mental health professionals in our communities too. Lack
that's
of
key. The
centric.
lack of trained professionals.
Absolutely. What
Some
would
of
be
the
the
things,
ideal infrastructure for something like this? If you
a
could create
very strong system of support for families and individuals that does not exist now. For example, if you have a member of your family who may be bipolar and is not responding to medication, or in the case of my brother, refusing to take it, he wouldn't take the medication. He said it slowed him down too much,
sure,
so he wouldn't take it. But there were times when he would become very manic in his behavior and become frightening. He didn't scare me because I learned a long time ago that if you throw a skillet at him, he'll leave you alone. But that bullyish, and just they drive fast and recklessly. They do reckless things. They say things, and families become frightened. And to call the police for assistance, we now know is not the thing to do, because the police department is not trained on how to deal with mental illness. And it is an illness just like diabetes, arthritis, um, cancer. It's an illness that can be debilitating. And the person who is ill is not happy with the illness and not happy with how they're behaving. They just don't know what else to do. So we need a strong system of support, um, training for families. You know, in my book, I talk about how my father was mentally ill. We figured that out. My mother figured it out because of his mood swings and his violent temper.
Sure.
And she tried to get help from the United States Air Force, and they would not help her. Help her in terms of, please tell me what's wrong with my husband. Because this was like in the 50s and the 60s, and with a code of silence. They supported the serviceman, and if he did not want his family to know of his condition, that was it. But he would check himself into the psychology ward at Travis Air Force
Sure.
Base
Sure.
whenever he felt the anxieties, becoming out of hand.
Yeah,
So
my
all the time growing up, we're thinking he's going off to the Air Force. He would leave, be gone for months, maybe a year or two. Then he'd come back for a short period, start raising hell, then he would go away again. And we all thought he's just going off to his Air Force duties. No, he was going back to the hospital
wow.
because he was able to understand when he was changing, when he could no longer focus and function, and he would back in.
I love that though that he had the foresight to take care of himself when he knew he was creating problems for the family and being a detriment to
Yes.
the family and getting out of control. Because most people don't have that foresight or that
He was a brilliant man.
yeah,
As the research that I went through,
have a
he
motive.
never
Yeah,
went past the third grade. He taught
sure,
himself to
sure.
pass the GED, and he taught himself to pass the entrance exams to get into the Air Force. And after he got in there, he taught himself to pass the different exams needed to advance. And they questioned whether or not there were a couple of times they pulled him out. You
Right,
couldn't have earned this score.
because he's black.
You're black and you didn't finish high school like everybody else did. And they'd retest him with a special proctor and he'd do it again. And my brother, the one who was a year and a half older than me, had a lot of his characteristics too. Brilliant mind. He could figure out anything, but he had a short temper, and he passed away. Oh, I guess about 5 years ago. He was 67 years of age, and it's just too bad that the understanding was not there. He would have benefited from having his father more involved in his life to teach him how to grow up as a black man in America.
You talk about mental health in the military. I know I had an uncle that was in Vietnam.
Oh God.
And he went in when he was like 18 and came back
Yeah.
really messed up because of the drugs and stuff like that. And he
They
ended up in
drugged them up in the
Napa,
fields,
drugged
so
him
they
up.
wouldn't be in pain.
Yeah. And he
He
ended up
did.
in Napa and then he ended up on the streets doing drugs. And so again, the stigma and this culture of mental health issues and not addressing these issues in the military. I mean, how do we get around that? How do we get around these stigmas?
You have to really understand, and I don't know. See, I'm talking about the way the military behaved back in the late 50s,
Right,
early 60s.
right.
I don't know that they are still behaving the same way. I think they are, because as late as maybe the late 80s, I was taking my mother up to the Veterans Affairs building in Oakland, trying to get copies of my father's medical records. They would not release them to her. The runaround, okay, I'm there in the Bronx, New York, and we sent for them. As soon as they come, we'll let you know. So we call, we go back. I mean, this went on for years. They haven't sent the records yet. We know a runaround when we see one.
Absolutely. And the post traumatic stress syndrome, right? Even, I mean, that's a lot of the causes of the mental health coming out of the military as well, right? And so
Well, that
now we
and
know what to call
growing
it.
up Black in America.
Yeah, but
You know,
now with
my
that, we
father,
know, we can see it now. We didn't know what it was
yes.
before, right? Now we can see it and identify it.
Yeah, talking to my aunt and uncle, they told me stories about growing up in Newton, Mississippi. I mean, they lived like maybe 7 or 8 miles into the woods, and the types of things that they had to do in order to survive. And that kind of helped me to understand why Black parents are so strict with their kids about you be home when I tell you to be home. Because where my father grew up, a child who didn't come home, it meant a number of things. It probably meant that somebody had caught him and he was strung up somewhere or about to be burned alive or beaten alive or drowned. So when a child did not come home on time, they immediately gathered up the forces, went out to look for that child. While the forces were out searching for that child, there was no one at home to protect the women folk. So they had to protect themselves. So for a child to foolishly not obey the family's rules and not come home on time was dealt with very severely by the parents, because you just don't do that, because it means a lot, and it means a lot of people are going to be involved in trying to make sure that you are safe. I remember, I guess I was about 8 and my brother Grover was 10, and we were visiting my grandparents in rural Virginia. And you know, the church had no air conditioning. You think it's hot here? Go down south in August, see what it's like.
Oh no,
It
it's
was
really hot.
so hot. So we raised the obligatory finger, you know, asking for permission to go to the restroom. We're going to go outside and play. We went out in the back where the graveyard was, and we were playing a game called Onward Christian Soldiers. We had these long sticks, and we're marching around through the
That's a
graves, you know,
song, right?
singing the song, marching off to war. When Grover decided, let's stomp on the graves and see if anybody dead comes out. Now, I'm not going to do that.
Uh-uh.
He goes through stomping on the graves, and one of them, his foot went down to his knee, and he couldn't get out. He's, help, help, a dead man got me. He's trying to help. So I ran into the church, you know, screaming, a dead man got Grover and won't let him go. Well, they're thinking probably maybe a Klansman, someone who looked like a ghost, was there attacking a child. So they all ran out to the graveyard to protect this child. And when they found out what really was going on, they like gave my grandparents and my mom the eye, like, that's your child. Better take care of it. Which they did that evening. We got home. We got taken care of very well. And I thought at the time they were being so mean when all we did was fall in a hole. But it's the whole specter. Someone could have been attacking that child because of the color of his skin. And we had to go out and protect that child. So not only was that child out there being disrespectful to a graveyard, they were disrespecting the rules of the church. They should have been inside suffering and sweating like everybody else. And they caused everybody in there, all the men immediately ran out to
Yeah.
protect this child.
But let's talk about the community, right? How the community rallies around us
Yes,
to
yes, the
help
village,
the
the
family, the
village.
village, and the church. The church was our village, is
It
our village as
was.
well.
If the
So
parents
around,
are sick and can't get kids to Sunday school, somebody would come get those kids. They might pile you up 8 kids deep in a car. You might have 3 kids sitting on laps, but they got them to church.
and they
They got them
watched
to
you.
BTU. They
I
got them
went
to choir rehearsal. They got them where they had to go.
I went to St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church in Richmond, California.
St.
And
Martin Missionary Baptist Church in Vallejo,
you
California.
out of line, you out of line, somebody watching you, and you bet my
That's
mama
right.
find out about it when I was acting up. But around mental health and abuse, our churches still haven't got to that point to where they have arrived at providing support and education and counseling. I've seen a few churches implement counseling services and peer counseling and stuff like that, but especially now, that's another space that we need to see happening
It
in
has to
our
happen,
spiritual
but
realms.
it has to be able to happen. You have to have people who are going to the church who are willing to accept the help. You have to have a church that has the resources to provide the help. Okay.
I
Um,
agree. But even recruiting, like one of my girlfriends is a psychologist, and actually we can have her on or her on in the future. And she became a peer counselor at South Bay Community Church back in the 90s or early 2000s. And that was, that was relatively new, right? And
yes.
so considering the pandemic and creating a community structure, infrastructure, we need to bring in more of that, more of the professional and spiritual expertise to work with our people in the mental health
And the people
and
need to come to where the help is available. It's kind of difficult now with the fact that we don't have church meetings going on. The church meetings are all by Zoom or by conference call, but I'm finding that there is a closeness that develops. I'm a member of Antioch Baptist Church,
Mhm.
and we Zoom our church services every Sunday, and we have more people on the Zoom call than sometimes we would have had in church on a Sunday. We have members who have moved out of state who are Zooming into our services on Sunday. So that's a positive thing. So it's quite possible, since the people are able to come in by Zoom who weren't able to actually physically drive to the church for a Sunday service, there is a possibility that a type of a counseling could develop that could be of assistance. I think it's easier for people to come in by conference call and Zooming than it is to drive, especially when we're all over the place.
And this zooming concept is really in vogue now, and I don't think it's going to go away.
Oh
Um,
no, it's only going to improve.
this whole virtual thing is going to improve and get better in a way to reach out to people that our communities, our spiritual communities, don't normally have access to. And so this would be a great resource to start. I know the
Yes.
Africa Center is doing some mental health support and mental emotional health support on Mondays. I know that there's a very few programs here in the area, and actually there's one in Sunnyvale. I can't think of the name right now. She's going to kill me, but we'll bring her back later too. But we need more of that here
We
in
need more. We need to erase that stigma.
the
You
stigma.
know, there's no stigma if you fall down and break a leg. There's no stigma if you have diabetes, or if you have kidney problems, or if you have breast cancer, or if you have, any type of ailment. And there should not be a stigma with mental illness. It really should not, because that prevents people from wanting to get help. They don't want to be
Absolutely.
known.
What are some of the in doing your, and we'll talk about your workshops in a minute, but what are some of the best practices that you've seen so far, maybe in the San Francisco Bay Area or some of the other states around mental health advocacy and abuse, if any, and kind of give us an idea of what you've seen so far.
What I find to be very effective is when people who are suffering with mental health issues, who are pillars of the community, are willing to come forward and say, I am bipolar, I have been for over 20 years, and I'm on medication, or I am caring for a sibling or a parent, my husband, and I'm okay. Um, the medication needs to be adjusted. There just needs to be understanding, just like with any type of illness, the medication has to be adjusted, and there has to be an understanding of what the individual is going through and how the family can support that individual. Because if they're trying to fight the battle all by themselves, it's like a person who takes their pain medication on time. They're not hurting, they won't take it. Okay, and sometimes with the medication or the counseling or the therapy, they need to be encouraged to participate. In the case of a family, the whole family needs to be in therapy to understand how to support this individual and how to live along with them at the same time.
Well, Gerri,
So it's,
I like that. And I'm hoping that we'll have more dialogue about creating resources and
mhm.
identifying those resources and sharing them with our community here, because we know there's a lot of advocacy in the San Francisco Bay Area, but our little community, we need more support, and we need to be able to publicize it and advertise it. So tell us about the workshops that you've been hosting since you've created your book and brought out this subject. What
Well,
are
the workshops are really centered around the book. I used a young woman who was trying to understand the behaviors of her father growing up. So she went back and investigated, which essentially was me, investigated the historical background, environmental background. People who grew up in Newton, Mississippi in the 1930s had different experiences than someone who grew up in the Bay Area in the 1950s and 60s. Very
absolutely,
different. So
yeah.
understanding those experiences. And the young woman was so angry with her father for so many years because she observed him hit her mother. She observed him hit her. Um, and that's something that when a child sees that, to see your mother on the floor crying, cowering, while some brute is physically, hitting her. And then as a child, you go up to him, stop hitting my mommy, then he slams you into a wall.
Right.
That's trauma. And for many years, even after I stopped my father, by the time I was maybe 13, that was the final blow up, and police had to come and take him away. And he came back the next day in a taxi cab and said, "I'm sorry, I'm sick, I'm going to get some help," and he left in a taxi cab. I never saw him again. So all my life, I was thinking, I'm going to grow up. We knew he was in New York because he would send us, for a while, he sent money from New York. Then he stopped sending anything. And I was going to grow up and go to New York and find him and pop him in the nose. Because
You're gonna beat them down. So
I was
your
going to
work,
pop him in the nose. You hit mommy, hit
so your
me.
workshops though are about
Workshops
people's
are about
experiences. Yeah,
understanding when someone has done something or you see behaviors that are bizarre to you before you go off and, oh, I'm afraid of that person. I hate that person. I want the person locked up. Try to understand what that person is going through, where they have been, what they're doing. And that might bring some light onto why the behavior is what it is. Then, once you can understand a person, forgive them for whatever
absolutely,
harm they may have done to you or someone that you love. Then forgive yourself for holding on to that anger, because that is just like a cancer eating at you when you're angry
absolutely,
at
Gerri.
someone.
Absolutely.
When you
I
can understand and forgive them,
forgive
forgive
them.
yourself, you can love them in spite of it.
I talk about as I'm maturing, just turned 60.
Trying to catch up with me.
I am trying to catch up with you. I'm gonna write a book next. No, um, I now look at things and I go, okay, I gotta take myself out of my human eyes and I have to look at things with my spiritual eyes. And when you look at things from a spiritual perspective, your spiritual eyes, then you learn and you focus on compassion. You focus on patience. You focus
Mm-hmm,
on God, what God would do, what the foundation of God in the love first, right?
mm-hmm,
Versus how we were psychologically and emotionally trained and conditioned from a human perspective. And I think that piece is really important too in this whole emotional psychological mental health space, because I have family members also that are, I have a sister that's bipolar, I have a sister that I just met, and and many times I've thought that I'm schizo myself, right? I had some
living in this society, you can't help it.
everybody has issues, right, in our family,
Yes,
but
yes,
now we
yes.
can openly have that discussion. But in ODOS we talk about creating a safe place for the sisterhood, for sister entrepreneurs
You
who
need to be
are
safe. Yeah.
developing safe
And as you're
environments.
understanding and forgiving these individuals, I would never advocate for anyone to be a punching bag for anybody else.
Right.
I would not advocate staying in a situation that was injurious to your health, either mentally or physically. Don't hold the anger. Do what you can to support the individuals. And it may be that the support is not going to be within the same household. I had a friend who's passed on now who went through a lot of issues with the military. And he shared with me that when he came back the last time, he would have these flashback dreams. He said, and I woke up one night, I was trying to strangle my wife.
Wow.
I said, then you need to have your own bedroom.
Yes.
I said, that's all. You don't move out the house. You have your own bedroom.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. And your family, you guys can love each other, support each other. But when you have these uncontrollable flashbacks at night, no one else is in danger. And I believe that's what they did. He had his own bedroom.
It would be nice to have, and we're going to wrap up, but it would be nice to have like this interdisciplinary network, right, of experienced professionals, probably like you with PhDs, with all of this and Afrocentric background experience.
God, can you imagine the conversation that we would all
It
have?
would be phenomenal. But,
Oh my
you know,
God.
we talked about, you know, here in Santa Clara County that there's no Black therapists. It's very few, especially in the systems in Kaiser and stuff like that. And I remember posting out, you know, where are the Black therapists? Where are the Black psychologists? Where are the Black, you know, and they're just so far and few and in between. And so, but having maybe in this new, you know, environment, in this post-pandemic, we will see some new services, interdisciplinary services created to, from a holistic perspective, to help the whole person on all these different areas, or at least be able to refer them. And so that's something we can talk about when we come back.
And you know, you don't have to be Black to be able to work with Black issues.
Well, so in my personal situation, when I was going through my stuff and seeing some therapists, I felt that they couldn't relate culturally. So there has to be some cultural education, I think, with some of these therapists if I'm going to see somebody, because
you want somebody, because you can find a Black therapist who will not relate to you. Okay, so you want someone who has the knowledge and the passion to work with you.
Right, and I just couldn't find it.
It's like saying that a man cannot counsel a woman because he's not a woman, but there may be some men who can.
So that's another level then, vetting professionals to meet some of your needs that you
right. And once we get rid of that stigma, stigma of mental illness, if I'm having issues, mental issues, and I have a therapist who's just awesome, I can refer that person without being afraid that, oh, now everyone's going to know that I'm seeing a psychiatrist.
Right, exactly.
So that stigma has to be erased.
It has to be eliminated.
Look at it as illness. Look at it for what it is. It's an illness that can be treated.
Embracing our mental health and being able to have that conversation and moving towards healing. I love it. Gerri, this has been really exciting. I hope this was phase one.
Oh, we could go on for hours.
We're gonna have you come back. I don't know if I told you this, but my degree is in psychology. I should have got my MFCC and I messed around and did some other stuff. But I worked in gerontology for 17 years too.
And mine was behavioral science.
And I was in my 30s, and now here I am. I need some gerontology services. But this has been phenomenal, Gerri. Your book, Prayers and Beatings, and moving beyond our fear and erasing the stigmas around mental health. We want to do more of this. We want to have more of this dialogue and discussion and share resources and information. We look forward to your workshops, and we'll be posting that because you are a new ODOS member. Thank you very much. You're our most recent member, and we appreciate you. And this is what we do. We help.
I'm excited about becoming a member. I really am.
Promote you. We empower you. We create a safe space for you so that we can grow together in the sisterhood as entrepreneurs, as we can look at a holistic, you know, our challenges and help solve those challenges together and globally. So thank you for being with us today. Everybody, this is Lisa Riley. Go to www.ODOS We take donations. We are always signing up new members, and we are here if you want to join, if you have questions, you need referrals and information about your business, and also globally, if you want to hear what entrepreneurs are doing in other countries, how they're pivoting in the midst of the pandemic. We just finished our global Black female entrepreneur forum. That was our first forum. We're going to have a couple of more coming up before the end of the year. We had really awesome dialogue with sisters in other countries pivoting, doing their business in the midst of the pandemic. So we love you. We'll be back. Go to our website, www.ODOS Thank you, Gerri. We love you, and we're going to have you back very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.